welcome to our new series on must-watch Asian horror movies. These are movies that are suitable for beginners to the genre and for seasoned horror movie fans. I'm the Artie Dans from Asian Film Fans, and alongside our friends at Movies and Mania, we're going to take a detailed look at some awesome, weird, wacky, and scary Asian horror movies throughout 2021. And first up, we've picked an awesome movie from Korea that's perfect for newbies of the genre. The blood-curdling 2018 spookfest, Gonjiam Haunted Asylum. Now you may be wondering why we've picked this movie as the first one in this series, and the answer is simple. If you're used to watching Western horror films and want to dip your toes into Asian horror, but are worried you might not be able to follow along with the mythology or themes, then this movie is a great choice. Because of the similarities to many Western horror films, we felt this was a great choice to ease you into Asian horror. But don't worry, future episodes will definitely cover more Asian style horrors. If you're a seasoned Asian horror movie expert, we think you'll be curious about this one too, just to see how the Koreans tackle the found footage genre. Just a heads up, this is a movie discussion. I've tried to keep this as spoiler free as I can, but there is a discussion about the plot and characters that appear in this movie. This movie takes its inspiration from a list created by CNN Travel back in 2012 of the 7 freakiest places on the planet, which has now been amended to 10 places. Coming in at number 1 on the list, although I don't think it was in any particular order, was the Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital in Gyeonggi, Korea. Proud of this fact, the movie even shows the article a few times in the opening sequence. In this movie, we are introduced to the production team of the live streaming channel Horror Times, who are aiming to set a live streaming record of 1 million views. Their plan to do this is to spend a night at Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital, with the help of a trio of willing girls, one of which seems to be crossing off the freakiest places locations off her bucket list. They secretly hike to the grounds around the hospital, set up their tent for the live stream, and all of them except for the director head off to the hospital to commence their broadcast at midnight. Entering the hospital, they are confronted with a fairly derelict looking building. Covered in graffiti and debris, it's clearly seen better days. The backstory to the hospital's closure involves the ex-director who was supposedly performing experiments on the patients, which then resulted in their mass murder and her suicide. It's said their spirits remain in the hospital. There's also a locked room, 402. No one has ever been able to get into this mysterious room, and it's also the main attraction of the live stream, where the audience is promised that the interior of the room 402 will be revealed live to the world for the first ever time. After a series of staged paranormal encounters, the real spooky stuff begins after they disturb the spirit residing in a wooden coffin-type apparatus and its creepy-looking doll. From then on, we are witness to a series of very creepy, very freaky encounters. From possessions, to mysterious scratches, to a room with no doors and water for a ceiling, our 7 victims start disappearing one by one, leaving behind an eager internet audience keen to see the outcome of the promised live stream. There are 7 main characters in the film, the 6 who go into the asylum, and the director in the tent coordinating the live stream. There is also 1 spirit, although you might technically say there is 2, with one being the ex-director of the asylum and the other being the patient that the doll belongs to. In and of themselves, the 6 who go into the asylum are your typical horror movie cast of characters. Like most horror movies who use the found footage trope, almost every actor in this movie is using their real name. I say almost everyone because there is one character played by Yi-won-mun who calls herself Charlotte. Charlotte is the most interesting of the three female characters. She's the one with the real-world experience, having visited other haunted locations that featured on the CNN freaky location list. She also has the best freak out in this movie that's quite well done. One of the other female characters in this movie is a timid nursing student who's always being picked on by one of the other males. Her innocence is in stark contrast to Charlotte. However, interestingly, their roles kind of reverse later in the film. It's not that she loses her innocence, she just becomes a little more confident, especially in the wake of Charlotte having her breakdown. However, the three male characters are not remarkable. Two of them have very specific roles in this film, but to tell you more would be a spoiler. But easily the most memorable, and by extension the most loathsome character in the movie, is the director of Horror Tales. While at the start he seems like a decent guy, he seems to genuinely care about the cast. But as the movie progresses, we are witness to his selfishness and greed kicking in. As he notices the viewer numbers rise, he wants the cast to do more, to stay in creepy rooms longer, or to say certain things to the camera. He wants them, no, he demands from them, that they stay in the hospital even after it's obvious that the spirits are real. All he can think of is getting to 1 million views and being the first person to open room 402. The movie needed a real bad guy, and he's it. As mentioned, this movie is based on the real-world location of Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital, noted as one of the 3 scariest places in Korea. Alongside a haunted house that's spooked by ghosts from the Korean War, and a former restaurant where the sound of dishes being washed can be heard. According to trivia, the filmmakers were actually unable to get permission to film in the real hospital. Thus, they ended up using the abandoned building located on the grounds of the National Maritime High School in Busan. Not a haunted location, just abandoned due to the school relocating, but attempts to refresh the school have failed due to funding issues. The filmmakers attempted to recreate, as best as they could, the layout of Gonjiam at the Maritime High School, which ever since has become a popular thrill-seeker location. It certainly looks the part. This movie is also one of the most successful horror movies from Korea, just behind Phone from 2002 and A Tale of Two Sisters from 2003, both of which we plan to cover in this series. I've tried to avoid spoilers as much as I can, but note this section does talk about bits that occur later in the film. There were a couple of bits that creeped me out, where the skin on my arms got a little bumpy and my hair stood up, and they were those awesome possession scenes. Due to the nature of the film, the way it was shot made these scenes extra creepy. With the dual GoPro cameras mounted in front of each character, one facing forward to get the character's point of view, and the other facing the character to film their reaction. These scenes are presented using that camera, the reaction one, with the wider lens used adding a fisheye element. This just adds to the creepiness. Throw in the night vision and the contrasting blacks, and we are presented with pure black, soul-piercing eyes, with the mouth moving quickly, speaking in tongues, and the head twitching side to side. These shots were quickly flashed on and off the screen to add to their effectiveness, and were definitely some of my favourites. Another very creepy scene happens towards the end with the corporal body of the spirit who lives in the asylum. I don't want to ruin this bit as it's a bit of a spoiler, so best that you watch it for yourself and find out how creepy it really is. Finally, I also thought the scene where the director starts to experience some strange phenomenon in the broadcasting tent to be quite well done, with a nice creepy element as well. I do like how this scene begins the crazy decline of the director's mental state, forcing him to make some very silly decisions later in the film. If this movie feels familiar, it's probably because it is. If you're absolutely new to the horror genre from any country, then you'll be surprised to know that this movie, either deliberately or completely by accident, takes a lot of cues from two American films of the last 2 decades. The first is the obvious comparison to the 1999 independent hit, The Blair Witch Project. Back when this movie came out, it was quite the mysterious production, heavily advertised as a found footage film, that is, a movie that is supposedly pieced together from so-called real footage. Think of the Paranormal Activity series, who made this type of horror movie very popular. I remember as a 19-year-old watching The Blair Witch Project for the first time on VCD discs being shared between friends, and being disappointed that the first disc didn't work, so all I ended up watching was the second half of the film, which, to be fair, is the most interesting and scary part. There is a scene from The Blair Witch Project where Heather sees Josh standing and facing a wall. That is very reminiscent of a scene in Gonjiam towards the end. At the time, The Blair Witch Project was awesome, but it's a movie that hasn't quite stood the test of time, and has definitely been improved upon over the last few years, but of course its legacy has been kind of destroyed with a collection of sequels and video games. The second American film this movie takes inspiration from is the 2002 horror sequel, Halloween Resurrection, the 8th movie in the franchise, which was recently removed from canon due to the awesome 2018 Halloween film, deals with an online reality TV show who wants to attempt a live broadcast from the Myers residence on Halloween night naturally, in the hopes that Michael Myers comes home. And home he comes. This very poor addition to the series at least tried something different with the whole online reality TV concept, the same as what you see here in Gonjiam. From the director of the second movie, written by Carpenter and Hill themselves, the original creators of the series, and starring Jamie Lee Curtis, who contractually had to appear in the film, this Halloween movie was a disaster from the onset. Throw in a hip-hop artist no one nowadays has probably heard of, and supermodel Tyra Banks, this movie was more of a check-the-boxes kind of Hollywood film, that just coincidentally used a fairly interesting hook, but that was replicated with much better results in Gonjiam. Because of these two elements, I felt a sense of familiarity. I liked both of those movies, so it made sense I would enjoy this film too. Plus, Koreans usually make pretty decent horror films. While there are genuinely creepy moments in the film, it's nothing beyond what you've come to expect from typical teen-style horror movies from the past decade or so. It's certainly better than most American movies that have been released during that same time period, who have less reliance on crafting a story and casting actors that tick a certain box. This movie wants to and does build a creepy atmosphere for the audience. Helping the movie do this is the lack of music. Staying true to the whole live stream theme of the movie, the only time music is used is when the director is queuing up a replay of an event that occurred, and he has synced it to some stock music that the streaming uses. Otherwise, it's completely reliant on its ambience, the distant sound of something going clank in the background, or the demonic whispers of our possessed cast. While the movie is tightly edited and well presented, it's not overdone. It doesn't feel like an overproduced horror blockbuster, even though by definition it is. And that's what makes this movie an experience to enjoy for horror fans. Beginners and those new to the Asian horror genre will get a sense of familiarity with the premise. There's no mythological Asian ghosts or spirits that you'll have trouble understanding. There's no Asian customs that are only known to Asian audiences. This is a horror movie about 6 thrill seekers breaking into a haunted asylum to create a historic live streaming event while being egged on by the director. For that alone, this makes it perfect for beginners and someone looking for something different. If you've seen it, what did you think? I hope you enjoyed this detailed look at Gonjiam Haunted Asylum. We have many more Asian horror movies to look at over the coming year, so if you're interested, please press the like button and consider subscribing to watch the latest videos as they're released.